So we're now just going back over and checking our clutch kit. What we do is just cleaning off that surface because there was like a sticky sort of residue on it. Of course, we've had a look at the clutch and checked it fitted over those splines, and then we're going to unwrap the protective plastic because we're now near to fitting it. And of course, we're going to be using a clutch alignment tool and show you the tool we've set up to do it. Yeah, so our clutch alignment tools, you see we put it through the clutch plate, through the springs, and that goes into the engine side, and that makes sure it aligns, because technically until it's bolted up, this clutch here can just float about. So what would happen is as you bolt it up, it would fix it in the place where it naturally settled, and then when you come to put the gearbox on, the spline shaft just wouldn't all line up. So that's why you need the clutch alignment tool, and we've checked ours is going to work. So this clutch will, as we do it up, get gripped into the right position so that the spline of the gearbox can go through it all nicely lined up. So we're now ready to start putting it all back. Yes, the other thing is we've had to get, we lucky enough had it, but it's like a special star fitting on the bolts, and it's a mixture of little studs and these bolts. Right, so we're just putting a little bit of copper slip in the entrance. That's just to make sure that it does go in easily, but you don't want too much, but just a small amount there. So we've got all the clutch ready, and we've got it flywheel side marked up. Yeah, you can just about see that. So we've ready to put it all back. Yeah, we've got the clutch into rough position on the dials. Then what we do is put a couple of bolts in very loosely, just so that it can't fall away, and then we'll use our alignment tool then to make sure the clutch is aligned. So then as we do those bolts up tight, it will tighten in the right place. What you can hope is we put a bit of carpet down so that if we did slip or drop the clutch while we're doing this, hopefully it'd fall on something softer than the hard surface and be less likely to be damaged. So what we're going to do now is get on and put in those couple of bolts so that it can't just fall away. Right, so we've now got all the bolts in finger tight, but the clutch plate can sort of float about at the moment. It hasn't been gripped as we do it up. So what we're now going to do is put the clutch alignment tool in so that the clutch can be properly aligned, and once we've done that, then we can tighten up the bolts. And you should even see those little spring fingers sort of tension as we do it up. Right, so we've got the clutch alignment tool in, and as you can see there, that sort of widest part sits in the springs, and then it goes through the clutch plate and into the engine, so that if that can go through, then when we put the gearbox on, that spline shaft should go right through the clutch and line to the sort of chamfered bit on the engine. So what we're now going to do is just start doing those bolts up, and it will then grip that clutch plate in position. And also when we're putting the clutch on, you can't get that in the wrong position because all these studs and bolts need to line up, and you can just look to where that lines up. What we're now going to do is tighten them evenly, as you can see, and you can kind of see, I think, those little sprung loaded fingers tensioning as we're tightening it. Right, so we're going to get on and tighten all of those now. Right, so we've got them all tightened up, and hopefully you can see that all the spring fingers have tightened in evenly, and they've more or less gone past that thick bit of our clutch alignment tool. So now we can take that clutch alignment tool out because it's gripped the clutch plate inside. What we've now got to do is torque those up to the specified torque setting. Right, so what we've just come down to is now underneath the car, looking up at the clutch, and you can see the screwdriver there is on the flywheel, and then that middle almost dark part is the clutch plate, and then you've got the main pressure plate there, and you can even see the mechanism there that pushes onto the clutch there to give you the grip, and you can also see the spring fingers there. Yes, you can see the drive straps there. So yeah, we thought that was good to come under here, and it just gives you a little look from the side view, which you of course again wouldn't get once the gearbox is back on, and it gives you a good idea that things are looking as they should do as well. That clutch doesn't look out of a line. Right, so we're now going to do the torque settings, and we're just using a screwdriver into the flywheel and locking it. Also, you need to be careful you don't do any damage, and we'll go round again doing it evenly, setting each bolt to its right torque setting. We're just checking all the torque settings, and as always we're using the Haynes manual. Right, so we've got the gearbox on our little jack lift, but before we put the gearbox back in, we've got to put the release bearing in. What we're doing is just putting a little bit of grease on the inside of that release bearing, and also going to put a little bit on the shaft, so that when it's moving up and down it can do that as freely as possible.
Right, and these two clips, there and there, go onto them.
Right, so we've now got the release bearing on. It was a little bit fiddly. We were probably being a little bit gentle. We wanted to make sure it clipped on right, and you just had to get the forks just aligned right so it gently clipped over. So if we move the clutch now, you'll be able to see it moving backwards and forwards, so it can then push against those spring fingers and engage the clutch, and you can see how that rotates. So as it hits the clutch that's turning, it will turn with it and still be able to push. So quite clever, but quite important, and that always needs to be changed, and our kit came with that one. So that's now on, so we are now ready to start offering the gearbox back up to the engine. Right, so as we bring the camera down underneath the engine, hopefully you can see that the gearbox is more or less off of the jack now that we use to get it up to the right height. We've got it on the dials, and we're just putting 2 bolts in just to hold it in, and what we're going to do then is remove the jack, and that gives the gearbox will sit then in the position that we want it to. And if I come up to the top, you'll be able to see there is the jack that's been supporting it, and the gearbox is now touching the engine and in its place. We're going to get those 2 bolts in just so it's fixed and steady and stable in there. Right, so now we've got those 2 bolts in which are steadying the gearbox and making sure it can't fall away. What we're now going to do is put back this first sort of engine gearbox mount, which is up here. It's the one we've got all painted, so it's that big rubber sort of circular donut mount, a little red bracket there, and then this one we've got sitting up on top of the engine, so it's almost like a 3-part mount that holds everything. So that's what we're doing at the moment. So we're slowly lining the brackets up. They do go in sort of a funny sort of position, so we're now putting in the rubber mount, and this is the one we had, but it is a new mount because the other one was broke. We're putting that there because that again helps you to sort of line things up, because where the engine's been moved, it's not going to be sitting exactly in place, so we're sort of doing all these mounts loosely and getting things back in place so it slowly lines up. Right, so we're now putting that mount in there. What we decided to do is to mount that to the gearbox, and then it will allow sort of jack the engine back up into a better position, so it will line up with that and also line up with this. As you can see, it's quite a way out, so there's a lot of manoeuvring about. We knew that because of the way we've done it, the engine will move about, and you had to move the engine about to get the gearbox out and reline it back up again. Right, so we've now got this mounting done. It does take a lot of manoeuvring the engine about and fiddling about, but we've got it there, mainly by a mixture of, if I bring the camera down, using our jacks to lift the engine and the gearbox so that everything lines up. Now we've even got it lined up with the rubber mount in the new one, so what we're now going to do is remove that so you can then put the bolt right through and put that back on. Right, so hopefully, as you could see, once we'd got it roughly lined up, we took the mounting off, and then we got the main pin bolt through and put the mounting back on. But it's one of those things, it depends how the engine's settled after doing the job as to what way actually works when you're putting it all back together. But hopefully we've shown you roughly how we've done it and the process that we've used. So that's just a case of putting that mounting there, the rubber one, back up onto the chassis beam. What we did, all the bolts are not fully tight and they're all loose to give you manoeuvrability whilst you're doing the others up, and then we will then finally tighten them once we're happy with all the positions. Right, so as you see, the last time we'd got some of the mountings back, what we're doing now before we put any more bolts back is just getting the clutch slave cylinder back into place. And what we've done was threaded it and got it right out the way so that couldn't damage, so we've threaded that back into its rough position, and we just sat it there. No bracket at the moment, and it's not in the arm there. What we've also done is just put the top linkage of the gear lever back. What we're doing is slowly putting bits back, and sometimes you have to redo bits, and other times it's just a case of getting it back, and that's what we're going through, that process. Right, so we've now got the slave cylinder into place roughly. What we did, you can see, we used a big lever bar, levered the clutch forward almost as if the clutch was engaged, and we then put this into place, put this little sort of nylon cap back onto the rod there, a little bit of grease, and because that was levered forward, it allowed us to drop it in and work. So what we've still got to do is put back the clips that definitely hold that into place. We wanted to get that into rough position to check that that would work before we did anything else. That's the little clip in there as well. So it is kind of the reverse of how we took it out, but I thought it was well worth us showing that, because it's useful to know that is a way that you can do it. As we said at the beginning, the manual implied it was worth removing that clamp there and then taking this off later, or possibly not even taking it off, which we can't see how you could do the job without taking that off, but we preferred to get it off out the way and not tamper with that connection, and that certainly worked for us. Right, so what we've done is pushed our foot on the clutch a couple of times, and we showed you that movement before we stripped it all down. So if you did want to see that, you can always look back at an earlier part of this video. What that's done is also, it's now almost made this clip nice and strong, so it sort of moved and settled it into place, which we're pleased about, and it moves nice and freely, so we know that's back and working before we move on to do other stuff. Right, so one of the other things we've done to a little bits of maintenance is, you notice these wires have got like a ribbed plastic, and if you see that one hanging just down there, we've got some new ribbed plastic and covered that because that had broke up. I can't remember whether we showed you that, so that's another little bit done. Again, one that would be difficult to do with everything in there. Right, so what we're doing at the moment is putting back the bracket at the back of the engine. You can just see the one we painted blue there, and that's been quite difficult to get back down in there. What we did do was just unbolt the 2 bolts on the ECU bracket, and that's let us move it out the way to get us a bit more space, but that is quite difficult to get in there. We did re-unhook some of that gear linkage that we'd put back early to do it, because they more or less, one gear linkage runs above and one runs underneath, so you have to try and thread it back down all through that. But we've got it back in now. We'll probably have to do some touching up on bits of the paint like we normally do, but apart from that, it is now in. It's just a case of bolting it up. And we've also put the reverse light switch back, which again, that might get unplugged, but if we don't, that's now back as well. Right, so we're just putting the ECU back. All we did really was remove the main bracket that holds it to give us a little bit more room. And then what we've also done is put this bracket that you can see across there, and that's all part of this bracket that sits there. And if I come round, yeah, so job to show you, it fits sort of on the side of the gearbox that sort of sticks out from the engine, so we've now got that back as well. Right, so we're now going to put these shields back, and they're the shields that cover up the sort of gap that's left between the engine and the gearbox when they join. The gearbox, that bell housing is a lot bigger than the width of the engine, so these sort of fit round. Again, very difficult to show them up. We have to get under there and show you once they're on. That's what we're going to be fitting next. Right, so we're now putting back one of those shields. Now that it is very difficult to show you. If I come back, you can see there's the exhaust and the bottom of the engine, and there's the bottom of the gearbox that sort of sticks down low, and we're putting that shield on, and the other two go sort of either side, a little bit up from that bottom position. And while we're under here, you can see that we've also put back the what I call the speedometer sensor. They're just where the drive shafts go. We've now plugged that back in. You can get a slightly different view of that big bracket that we struggled to get in. Right, if I put the light there, I think and try and pull it out, you can see the gear linkage there and there back on. There's that big bracket we struggled with, and just there is that bracket that goes along and across to the donut just up there. So yeah, I hope that gives you a slightly different view from the underneath. And again, it is the reverse of us taking it all off, but I think it is nice to try and show you as much as we can. Right, so we just put back that little bracket that holds the air conditioning pipe, and one possibly is easy to forget. We know on one of our cars that is missing, and we nearly lost that bracket while we were sorting things out tonight, so we want to make sure that one went back on, and that is held on by two of the main bolts that hold the gearbox on, which we're now slowly putting back as well. Right, so we're just putting on the back plate that covers over the sort of gaps that are left on the back of the bell housing, and with that one, you may remember we put back this bracket right here. Well, that one actually slides under that, so we had to take the bolts out. Luckily, as we've been saying, we've only been putting them back loosely, slid that up under, and then slid this bracket back on. That's the bracket that is linked to this sort of bar that goes across to that donut I was showing you underneath. So again, lucky enough we left those bolts loose, which was our sort of plan, to leave most of them loose so there was flexibility if we need to move anything about. We've put back the gear sort of selector rods, as we said, and we've checked that it goes into all the different gears, so as far as we know that's all right as well. And we're just going to continue on. We've got the other plate, the other side to put back, and a few more bolts as well. As you may remember that we changed this rubber mounting there as it was broken. There's actually one identical on the other side. This we're on the gearbox side of the engine. So if I bring you around to the other side of the engine where the cam belt is, there's a rubber mounting just down there identical, and we've removed that now. We found that was broken as well, and again, nothing specifically to do with this job, but if we're changing the mounting that side and doing all this work, it's well worth changing anything else that's broken, that's going to be easier to change now than at a later stage. Right, so if I bring you over to the bench just to refresh you, that's the bracket we removed, very similar to the other side. The rubber's completely gone, and the centre part of this sort of rubber mounting has broke. And you may remember me saying it's not so easy to get these mountings. Lucky enough, we'd bought one a long time ago actually for one of our Metros, the K series engine Metros, and it was exactly the same in every way. And when we looked, some of them were around about sort of £50 plus for these mountings, and I think the cheapest you could find was £30, but it wasn't fully clear. It was definitely for our 45s, but with a lot more looking, we actually found that there's a mounting for a Honda 4x4, surprisingly enough, in the 90s, and to us it looked very, very similar, and that was around about the £11-12 mark, and more in line with other mountings that we'd seen like this online. So we decided to order it to see, and as you can see, they are exactly the same. So it's the same hull, the same design of rubber, and exactly the same mounting, more or less. The only difference we can see on this one is this protrudes slightly more, so I have to see whether that's going to affect it. But lucky enough, it's not a main part of the mounting, so we may even be able to cut that off if it does affect anything. But other than that, it's built exactly the same, with even the same markings, and more in line with the price of a lot of other mountings that look very similar to that for completely different models of cars. So that's the stage out, and we're going to get that fitted, and I thought that might be useful to know and be aware of. Right, so while we're fitting that bracket, just to keep you up to date with what we're doing, we're now going round also and making sure the bolts are tightened, and if they've got a torque setting to that as well. As you can see, once we've tightened it, we then put a little red dot on the top of that bolt, so we know that one's been definitely checked so nothing gets missed. And also, again, not strictly to do with this job, but we're doing it whilst we did it, we removed this bracket this side and got that painted as well, and we've now put that back just before we put back this bracket that we're replacing. So down here, so that's what we're doing at the moment. Right, so what we have done is we have trimmed that piece off, so it's now exactly like that one, and that now allows this bolt to fit through. The only problem, that bolt's not long enough when that bit was on, so we decided that was worth cutting off. And as we say, we're sort of happy to modify this part. One, it's not the main mounting, it is a sort of an extra anti-vibration mount, and we find when you're looking for parts, there's only one seller selling something, and it's extremely dear compared to others. The chances are that part's going to be rare and could be even harder to get, so it's well worth looking for an alternative part in that sort of case. And we think it's always worth looking at Honda parts as well, because some of the parts were Honda, which is how we come to look at that. We assume they're also rare because we have seen some videos on YouTube where people have used silicone or seam seal to fill in there, and we'd far rather find a similar part and modify it than have to do that to an old part as well. So we're going to get on and fit that now. And while we're covering some of the little extra bits we're doing whilst doing this job, what we've also done is cleaned up the heat shield that goes over the exhaust, and put some heat resistant spray paint on there, so that's looking a lot better, because they are kind of sort of not a chrome but a shiny sort of metal, but you often get bits of rust on them, so that has cleaned that up nicely as well. Fitting that mounting back, and as you can see, the structure of the car stops you from just sliding it straight on that main bolt. So what we've done, if I'll just bring this down here, you see that mounting is held on by two bolts, and we've took one out, and that's allowed us to slide it down. Now you can see there, put the mounting back on and then push it back up into place. Then we can put that little bolt back in that's part of the main mounting, and then we can get the mounting back. So I thought that was worth covering, because that makes it a little bit easier. So we're now underneath the car. I just thought I'd show you as we continue to check particular bolts that we're putting back are completely tight, and also completely doing up some of the others. At the moment we're on that blue engine mount we painted at the back, and you can just see where the drive shaft would normally go in, but of course it's not there at the moment. So that's what we're still doing, is just continuing to get on with putting those bolts back to do with the mountings and around the bell housing, and getting them all done up and tight now. Right, so continuing on with some of the little bit of maintenance that we've been doing, again not specifically to do with the main job, but little bits we found along the way that are worth sorting out while we're doing all this work. And one of them, you may remember, was the earth lead on the battery was not looking in very good condition. That is almost nearly breaking off, so we decided we'd replace it. If you'd like to see a full video on us replacing both leads, the positive lead and the negative lead, we did a full video on that on our green 45, but I just thought I'd include it in this, as this is something we found whilst doing the job. So there's the old lead, and what we've got is some new battery lead. We've stripped the ends for the short one and also the long one. We've got the nice little eyelet ends that we're solder on. We're going to use our hot air blower to do that, and we've also got the nice end there as well, and we've also bought the plus leads there, the positive leads. We've got some of those in stock as well, so we'll probably change that, although we're not going to change the red wiring, the plus wiring this time, because that's not looking too bad. We're just going to replace those, so we'll get them soldered and put that on. Right, so we've now got the first end soldered, and as hopefully you can see, we've got a nice bit of heat shrink on there to protect it and to hold that end on and stop any fracturing like we got on the original one. And we're just about to get this one soldered on now. Right, so we've now sold that, so we've got a nice bit of heat shrink, and again we're going to heat that on with the hot air gun, and we really find this useful, because for a long time we sort of struggled with solder irons, and then even using a little lighter to melt on the heat shrink on this gun certainly makes it a lot easier. We've used it a few times now over the last year or so, and it certainly makes a difference, especially with heat shrink. And also we find it works really well with the joints that already have a little piece of solder in them for doing little electrical wiring. Right, and that's the heat shrink melted and nice and on. Hopefully the idea is that that will hold that on, so as well as being soldered, the heat shrink itself will hold that on. Right, so that's our new lead all made up, and as you can see, nicely soldered in the end, and then the heat shrink over to protect it. And what's nice about these ends we've bought is rather than having to have both wires crimped into one end, we've got them both with their own ends and bolted on here, and technically there's even space to take another wire off as well, so that clip's going to work out better for us. And it's hopefully sorted out the problem we had, which was this lead here is completely coming away, and rather than trying to repair that lead, we've got a nice new lead. So as I say, one little bit of maintenance jobs we're doing whilst we're doing the main job, but I thought it was nice to cover that. And once again, there is a full video where we did this on our green 45, but I thought I'd include it in this because that does seem to be a common failure point, so it's well worth having a look at your own. It was certainly worth us doing it while we're doing all the other stuff and had to have the starter motor off as well. Right, so we've got the starter motor back, but the wiring's got to go back to it, and of course we were renewing the earth lead from the battery, which goes down to the starter motor, but also clamps in there. And what we decided to do, there's specifically nothing wrong with the red lead, the plus lead. We're probably going to renew that as well, because we don't like how that's done. It is a very tight fit, and again it's fairly straightforward to change. This comes down to the starter motor, and the other end goes into the fuse box and it's just bolted, so again we can just unbolt that and completely renew that as well, and that'll be both of them done whilst we're doing this job. And also continuing with us getting all the bolts done up, you can just about see the blue engine mount down there. We've just tightened up the bolts on them and got them to fully tight as well. Right, so I thought I'd cover this as we continue to sort of show you some of the little bits of preventative maintenance and little jobs we're coming across. While we've got everything taken to bits, we might as well do them to save them being a full job in the future. One of the things we noticed was the track rod end rubber boot is all damaged and coming apart. You can more or less pull that one off. What we'd normally do is change the track rod end, but this one's been changed fairly recently, and there's no wear, and hopefully you can see there's good movement in it. So what we've done is bought a boot kit, and we're just going to change the boot. So we're going to do that on both sides. I'm only going to show you this side. So if we take that off, what we're going to do is clean out some of the grease. It's not too dirty in there, so hopefully it hasn't been broken too long, and then we can hopefully get a little bit of grease in there, not too much, because it's not very easy to get it in there, but we'll be able to get a little bit in there with that rubber boot. What we're trying to do at the moment is just get the rest of the rubber away, and then we'll be able to fit ours into that groove there. Right, so what we've done is got a little bit more of that rubber away, and then we've got a wire brush round, and we've got some of the rust away and the paint, and we can now see there is a ring holding that rubber boot on. What we've only been doing is levering away, and we've now managed to get that off. So what we do is get that rubber off of that ring and see if we can reuse it. But what that's definitely done now is revealed the ledge there for us to get the new rubber on, because we were worried that that ring been pressed on and might not come off, so at least we can now fit that new rubber boot. What we're doing is keeping that clean in there by keep wiping it out whilst we're doing any sort of wire brushing or cleaning around it. Right, so what we're now going to do is just wire brush it a little bit more and get it all clean round there so it's nice and clean, ready to put the new rubber boot back. Right, so we've got everything cleaned up now how we want to, and what we've done is put a little bit of grease just there. Now it's a job to get the grease right into this ball joint, but hopefully by putting it there it'll work its way in and also protect it. The metal ring we decided not to use because it was part of the rubber boot and we think we'd probably damage that boot by trying to use it. What we've seen in the past is sometimes almost like a thin bit of wire goes around, but we've actually found a very neat little tie that will hold this on, so we're going to do that. And we're doing the other side as well, and we managed to get that boot off in one piece, whereas when we were doing this boot down here, you may remember it broke up, and I just wanted to show you that because you can see the tears in that boot and how it's sort of disgraded and begun to really sort of crack up and break, and you can almost see the holes in it, so I thought I'd just show you that as well. So the next thing we're going to be doing is getting that boot on and getting that side done, and so we'll move on to the other side, but I won't show you that. Right, so that's the boot roughly sitting on there. We're going to get that a little bit more positioned, and then we'll use the tie to sit there. And these are from a universal boot kit, so we found the one that best fits. Right, so we've got the boot on, and what we've used is a nice narrow tie on the bottom, and then we've managed to find an even smaller one for the top. Now originally there was nothing on the top on those original boots, but this one there's room to do it. It has made that a much snugger fit. All we've got to do is just trim them, and that's the boot fitted on there. It's not something we normally do, but as we said, because we've changed this track rod in recent years, and in comparison to the mileage we've done, and there's no wear, we considered it worth doing. It's good for us to try this because in comparison to mileage, wear and the boots actually aging just from being out in the open air, this is probably a good sort of fix for us rather than changing the whole track rod end, which is right up to there on these, just for a rubber boot that started to fail. So yeah, hopefully, although this is a little job that we've done or come across for us doing this bigger job on the clutch, on its own, hopefully it's a useful little video, but again it's covering those little bit of maintenance we're doing on this car whilst we've got everything else stripped down, rather than having to come back to it later or even failing an MOT on it. So I think we covered this. We took the alternator off to paint, and one of the reasons we took it off is to give us a bit more access again, and also we noticed that the belts weren't in very good condition, and it was a good chance to change them as well, as they were well due to be changed. What we're going to do first of all is we've got to remove the power steering belt, because that's a separate belt from the alternator belt, and also remove the alternator belt that we've just left there hanging. Once they're removed, we can then fit the alternator back and also put the new belts on, and these belts are held on. I hope I can just about show you in there. They're automatic tensioners, so you just pull them back, that releases the tension, you can get the belt off. Right, so we're now going to release the tension on the alternator belt, and you can see that we're using a nice long spanner, and that certainly helps. Nice and straightforward on these with the automatic tensioner, and then you can just thread all the belt down. And if I take you up to the top, you'll be able to see hopefully the power steering pump, and just there is where the belt was. And of course we've got the alternator belt down there, which has just been left hanging, and we're going to remove that off as well. Obviously the tensioner has already lost its tension with that because there's no alternator there. Right, so we're now going to get the alternator belt out, and what we did forget, because we often actually do it when we've done a cam belt, so this is already off when we do it, is that you have to remove part of the sort of underslung engine bracket on this side to get the belt out. And what we've done, as you can see, is took the 2 bolts out of that bracket there, and also there's one more up the top that hopefully let us slip the belt out, and then we can put it all back. And I've just come round the top, and you can perhaps get a better view there how we've took those 2 bolts out, the bolt at the top here, and that's just let us slip the belt out, and then we put the new belt in, and we can get it all back together from there. Right, so we've got the belts off for you now, and what we've done is turned them inside out. Actually, this alternator belt is pretty bad. As you can see, there's cracks which even begun to completely split there. Normally they're only that bad when we've took a car on and we try and change them as soon as possible. But this one has been on a fair time, so it's actually done quite well. And again, it's one of those jobs, as I said, we're doing because while we're taking everything off and working on the car, it's far easier to do it now than having to do it as a completely separate job. The power steering belt is not quite as bad, and that's the smaller one of the 2, as you can see there. And what we always do is change them together because they're more or less intertangled with each other, and again, you want to be changing one and have to change another one later on, so we always change them together, and we normally try and buy them in a kit together as well. Normally that's quite easy, but this time it's been a struggle because there seems to be lots of belts at the moment for the non-air conditioning model, but not with air conditioning, which we'd have thought was more popular, and that's the alternator belt. It also goes around the air conditioning. It's well worth checking out for that when you're buying the belts, because if you get the one that's not air conditioning, it's going to be too small a belt. What we're also going to do is clean up the pulley wheel as well. So as you can see there, we've just been cleaning up the crankshaft pulley there. We'll also clean up the air conditioning pulley, and of course we're cleaning up the alternator pulley. That's off at the moment, as I said, because we're painting it, so it's a good chance to do that, because they often get sort of rusty and can even get sort of dirt and grubbiness in there, so when you change the belts it's well worth giving them a little clean up as well. Right, so while we're cleaning those pulleys up there, I'm just checking that the belts look roughly the same size. As you can see there, we've got the alternator belt stretched out, and normally if they're wrong they're a mile out, so that looks like that's going to fit, and hopefully you can see there just how nice the new one is in comparison to the old one. And we've also done the same with the power steering belt, and that looks to be a good fit as well. So once we've got those pulleys cleaned up, we'll be ready to fit them. We're fitting them now before we put the drive shaft back, because again there's a little bit more space to do that. Right, so we've got the new belt in position. As you can see, we're putting the bracket back now, and I'm just holding it where the alternator pulley will be, but again that's yet to be put back on, but that's allowing us to put that bracket back. Right, so as you can see, we've now got the power steering belt back on, and that was the reverse of taking it off with that automatic tensioner just being pulled back. Once you've got the belt in position, letting it go back. As we said, the alternator air conditioning belt is all ready for the alternator to go back on. So what we're going to do now is fit the drive shaft, and you may remember that we changed the outer boots on that and completely repainted it and checked it all over, so that's there all ready to go back. We're going to put that back, and then I'll show you in a little bit more details putting the shorter one back as we did when we took it off. Right, so we've now got the big drive shaft, the drive shaft on the driver's side roughly in position, and we now want to get the passenger side, which is the side I've mainly been showing you the stuff on. We've got out our piece of paper that was just blocking that to protect it, and we put some grease in there ready to put it in, and of course we've made sure it's nice and clean up at the gearbox end, and we've also put some grease down in there as well. Right, so we're just putting a little bit of bearing grease, the grease on the drive shaft, that's both ends, the end up there that goes into the gearbox end we've already done, and here at the hub end we're going to the gearbox end first, and then as we showed you we've removed the bottom ball joint, and also we've removed the fork in this case to clean it up and paint it, just to make it nice and easy to do these drive shafts. So we're now ready to get it back into the gearbox. So we're now getting back to kind of putting things back together from the original clutch job, but I thought it was worth showing you all those little bits, because there are bits you might come across and need to do. It's well worth doing, and we were aware of it, but hopefully it might make you aware that sometimes when you start one job there are other bits that you come across that you can't really leave or need to do. We've probably done more than the normal, but to us, while we had it up on jack stands and had all this stuff removed, it was well worth doing those extra bits. Right, so we've got it in at the gearbox end and also at the hub end. Obviously those splines need to line up in the gearbox end, so you sometimes need to move it around a little bit to get it to go in, and then you'll feel it go in and click. Right, so that's the drive shaft, and it did just pop in. Unfortunately we didn't catch that quite on camera, but we showed you it going in and sort of jiggling it in. What we've done is put the old hub nut on there so that can't slide off the hub. Now what we've got to do is put the fork back in, and you can see there that's where it goes on the top. And what we've done is we've left the bottom ball joint still disconnected there, so we've got some flexibility and movement for that fork to go in. I'll bring you around here. You can now see that the driver's side drive shaft is in as well. Right, so we're just cleaning out that hole there where the bolt goes through to hold the fork in, and as you can see down there we've got the fork ready, all painted, and they are marked up right and left as well. Right, so as you can see on the fork there, you've got the sort of pinch bolt, and that grips the more you tighten this bolt up, which is what grips up there, which hopefully you can see. And there's actually like a little groove in that, and where that pinch part is, that will line up with that groove, and it's very difficult to show under here, but if you were there you would see. You may kind of just about see it now, I think, so yeah, you can see that. And also if we turn that round, you'll be able to see where it's marked up. Yeah, you can see that's got an L for left, and the other one has got an R on it for right. Right, so that's the fork in rough position. Hopefully you can see we dropped it down, then brought it right forwards, and then pushed it back up, getting this lined up. So now it's in position. We've got to get that slot lined up round there and that pinch bolt back in, and then we can get the bolt back through the bottom. If I just bring you right out, you can then see in relation to where everything is, hopefully. Right, so now we've got the bolt in at the top, and you can see the red part of the fork is just up against this little rib here, and the bolt is now going through, and it'd only go through if it lined up with like that groove that runs in line with it, and we just wound it in a little way. Obviously you've got to tighten it up as well, but I thought hopefully that shows you a little bit better how that sort of groove works. Now it all lines up there as well. Now what we've got to do is put the bottom bolt in. But before we put that bottom bolt in, what we've got to do is put the bottom joint in, because obviously we need that movement, and once that bottom bolt is in, it will stop us being able to lift this up and down to get that bottom joint in. We've made sure that the split pin hole is nice and clear, and we've put some grease on it as well, all ready to get it into position. yes, as you can see there, we're checking that it's nice and clear.
But if you want to turn it to put your split pin in a different position, you can do.
And there you can see the bottom joints in. We can also then put the bolt back on there, and we'll be able to put the bolt back in there because we won't need that movement now.
Just put that on loose, we'll do it all up in a minute.
Right, and that's the track rod end in as well. What we do is put the bolt just loosely on the end of that, and then we'll have all the bolts to do up. And of course that bottom bolt has still got to go through to hold the fork in as well. Right, so now it's time to put that bolt through. And as you can see, it's ribbed there, and we've put some copper grease on it. What we're going to have to do is probably just pull the sort of suspension down a little bit to get those lined up, and then we'll have to push it right through.
Right, leave it a bit, just move it up and down a bit. That's it.
Right, so now it's just a case of doing all those bolts up. We've got that top pinch bolt there, we've got the track rod end bolt there, and of course we've got the bolt that runs right through the bottom of the fork. We're going to get on and do those all up. And of course don't forget we've got the bottom joint bolt down there as well to do. Right, so just put our bottom ball joint under there, as the bottom ball joint has got to a certain tightness, and then it's starting to turn in its housing rather than letting us get the final tighten up. So hopefully by putting a bit of load on it, it will let us get the final tighten, which it's allowed us to do. What we've also got to do is set all the torque settings to those bolts as well. That's the track rod end set to its torque setting. Now we're re-jacking up the suspension with our bottle jack to put a load on it, almost like the car is down on the road. That's what they advise for doing up the bottom bolt there, and we'll also have that for when we do that pinch sort of joint up there as well, where the fork joins onto the main part of the suspension.
That's that one.
And that's that lower bolt on the fork set to its torque setting, and hopefully you just see where we did the top pinch bolt right at the top as well. So that's now the lower suspension reassembled, and we take a lot of that out really to make things a little bit easier for us, but I thought we'd show us putting that back together and getting all the torque settings done as well. We've got to do that on the other side, and then we'll be on to the next stage of the job. So that's all those bolts tightened up and set to their torque settings. The only one we haven't done is the hub nut around the front. That's got the old one on just sitting there to keep it in and protect it, and then we'll put the new hub nut on and set the torque settings a little bit later on for that one. Right, so I thought I'd just move over to the driver's side to show we've got all the suspension back, of course including that fork there and the drive shaft back. So we've now got that back on both sides, and we're going to be, of course, putting back together the brakes now, because we removed them. We've got it suspended there, the caliper. We've been repainting that and just checking them all out and giving them a good clean as well. We've got some split pins to put back, and also any little bits of paint that have got marked while we're putting those driver shafts back. We'll just go round and touch that in. All right, so we've just come back up to the top, and you remember we were sorting out the belts. We're now going to put the alternator back in. It's back in but on a loose fit, not tightened up, and the belt's not put into position either. But part of the bracket that holds the alternator also holds the exhaust shield, and that's a stud. So what we normally do is try and get the exhaust shield down and then get that bolt in, and that's why we haven't tightened anything up on the alternator. And again, they were two things we removed for slightly better access, and also to paint them up, both the exhaust shield and the alternator, and it was also to change the belts as well. Right, so we're now getting the exhaust shield into place. This is always a bit of a struggle because you're more or less sliding it down between the exhaust, the radiator, the air conditioning pipe. So it's just a case of sliding it and wiggling it about, and eventually it does go into place. Right, so what we've done is hinged back that top bracket, and that's let us get that exhaust shielding a little bit easier. And sometimes you have to do that. It's about finding the easiest way, and sometimes it's easier to take something back off or remove another bit to get access, or to get another piece back in. Although that might seem difficult, long term it does often save you time. So that exhaust shield is now down. Naturally has gone in easier than it does on some of our other cars, so it's just a case now of getting that into position. It's one bolt down the bottom and then these two up the top, one of them that goes through the alternator bracket. Right, so that's the shield in position, and we've got two nuts there because we're winding the stud in. Then one of them gets removed, and then you do the final tighten. Right, that's that tight. Right, so we've got all the bolts done up. We're just checking they're nice and tight, and as you can see, the shield's now back in place, and we've done that bottom bolt. So the last thing to do will be to relax the tensioner so we can get the belt up over the alternator, and that'll be another completed section of this job. Right, so as you can see, we're pulling the tensioner from underneath, and we just slip the belt on so it's loose, and then as we let the tensioner go, you see the ratchet with the green socket on. It's now nice and taut, and I keep tensioned. And that's our two new belts and the alternator back on, and of course that exhaust shield as well. Right, so we've now got the battery leads back that you see us rebuilding and replacing. We've got the earth lead back on the body there, and of course it goes right down to the starter motor, and then our live lead going off to the fuse box, and right down there as well. And we've also now got the screen washer bottle back in to place, and we're ready to put the wheel arches, those plastic wheel line arches, back in as well. Screen washer bottle there, we've got a back wipe and the front wipes. That's why you've got the two motors on this one. Depends if you've got that or not, whether they'll be there. And we've cleaned that all up because on ours it was pretty dirty inside and out, so that's looking a lot better as well. What we always try and do when we remove anything like the wheel liners or any plastic, we clean them up as well, so we give them a good clean, and then we normally put a sort of a bumper cream treatment on them, and that sort of keeps them looking a lot better and also helps them to clean up better later on. So once they're done, then we'll be able to put them back on. Right, so as we said, we're trying to get the plastic wheel arch liners in, and we also want to get the bumper, which again, we're technically not specifically need to do this job, but we wanted more space. We wanted to do the headlights, clean them up, which there's going to be a separate video on those. The plastic wheel lines we've got roughly back, but we're going to have to get the bumper back to fully fit them. But first of all, what we want to do is clean the bumper up, and it might be easier to show you the fixing points of the bumper while it's off. You've got some plastic clips, and there's two here just above the headlight, and another two on this side. Then you've got a fixing point, a metal sort of screw that goes up under the wing, which is why you need the wheel arch liners loose to get up and get that one done, or even removed. And then you've got a fixing point there, and over the other side, and there's that other wing side there. But before we fix it up, we're going to give it a clean up, because it's something that doesn't often get done, and there's a bit of foam that sits in there that we've removed, so we can clean it up as well. And those fixing points, those little plastic bits, the bumper goes over this and fixes in there and into those holes there, and the under the wing little screw is right up under here. Yeah, you can see it just about there, I think. And underneath the fixing points there, going into this beam right here. So yeah, I think it is easier to show it when it's all off. So we're going to get on, get it cleaned, and then get that bumper back on. Right, so we've got the bumper ready to slot on. What we've done is got the fog lights plugged in, because it's far easier to do it now than trying to fiddle about underneath. And then it's just a case of two of us getting it on and easing it into position, which we're going to do now. Right, so we've got the bumper in position. It is just a case of slotting it back in. There is like a little plastic clip there that you need to slot in, that just holds it. And then what we normally do is put these plastic fixing screws in. That just stops the bumper accidentally sort of falling off while you're doing the fittings underneath, and those, and it also will hold it into a rough position. So once we've got those in both sides, at the moment we've got the grommets, then there's like a little bit that pushes in there. We can then do up the bolt that's there and round the side there, and then the two fixings underneath, which we showed you before. I'll just have a little look again, and you can see them right there. So that's the little plastic bits going. They're almost like a sort of a pushing screw type plastic bolt. So we get them eased in and then screw them in. Right, so we've now got the plastic bolts up in the top. So what we're going to do now is do the bolt under the wing. This is the most awkward one to do, because it is a little bit fiddly up there, and it's certainly one that if you take the plastic wheel liners right down is a lot easier to get at than trying to pull them away, which is why we've left the other one loose once we do it fitted around the water bottle and everything was set up, and we haven't put this one back at all. So now I'm going to go around and do the other side, and then it'll be a case of doing the bolts up underneath. Right, so the last two bolts that actually hold the bumper on are these two underneath, one which we're doing up and one that goes on there. That's the bumper then fully fixed. Then there is of course the wing guards to go back, and there's also like a black under protector tray that goes I think just past the exhaust there. That's the main bumper fixed up. That's what we've got to do next, is get those wings and under tray back up. Right, so we've now got the wheel arch liners in, and it is a series of fixings there. Some are done with sort of Rover plastic screw top, and others we've got little screws and washers. We've got our mud flaps fitted. They're aftermarket ones, and actually there is a video of us fitting them to give you an idea of fitting mud flaps as well, genuine Rover ones, and also some basic aftermarket ones. So that's all back on now. So what we're going to do next is actually put in the oil back into the gearbox now. Right, so this is the gearbox oil we're using. There was some different gearboxes used for the Rover 45, so it's worth checking the manual. This is the gearbox oil for the gearbox that's in our 1.4, and it was the I think R65 gearbox we've got in that one. What we always do is put a bit of the Lucas oil stabiliser, because we find that really helps to protect things, and certainly makes the gearboxes quieter as well, like it does with the engine. So we always put a small amount of that in as well. And what we've done, as you can see, is it's in a bucket of warm water, because if you're doing it in cold weather like we are, then it's well worth having the oil warmed up a little bit, especially the oil stabiliser. It certainly flows better, and we use a little pump, which I'll show you in a minute, to pump the oil up into the gearbox, and it's certainly easier using that pump if the oil is nice and warm. And sometimes even in the summer it's still worth doing that, especially with the Lucas oil. Right, so we've got the drain plug back in now. We had that in anyway whilst we were doing the work, but we took the fill plug out, which is up there, so we're ready to fill the gearbox. It's certainly a lot easier to see it all with it painted and nice and clean as well. So I'll show you the little pump we use, and it hooks over into that hole so it doesn't keep falling out. Right, so there's the pump we use, and as I was saying, it's got a nice little metal hooked part of the pipe which just hooks over into that hole so it doesn't fall up, and we find this makes it a lot easier than using a funnel and a pipe. And what we've got is some markings on there, and that's the marking we put the Lucas oil up to. Then we fill it up with the rest of the oil, try and mix it in the best we can, but it gets mixed in the gearbox anyway, and normally it takes about 2 of these when you're refilling it. I think the full amount is possibly 2.5 litres, but normally we only get 2 of these in, because there's obviously going to be some oil still in the gearbox. Right, so we've got a pump full of oil, as you can see, and then the tube goes all the way up and into the fill hole of the gearbox. There, as you can see, that hook goes nicely in and stops it from sort of jumping out. So now all we've got to do is pump that oil in. Right, so we're now on the second fill up of oil, and normally we find the most it normally ever uses is the whole of this bottle. Often it might not even use this, going in a little bit quicker because we've not got the wins in this second bottle, and all we're doing is looking for it to just start to dribble out the top, and we know it's then full up. So we're going to get on, pump hopefully most of this bottle in, and then we'll be done. Right, so it's just come to the full point. Hopefully you can just see it start to almost overflow over those threads and drip down. So we now know that the gearbox is full up, and we did think actually it was going to take another bit from a canister, but just as the canister nearly got empty, it just started to fill up. So it has took the 2 full canisters to get it overflowing out the fill point. Right, so we're now putting back the little short plastic under tray. When you're around here, it slots up with one little plastic screw up into the wheel arch, and then you've got a series of fixings. One which has like this metal bracket, and then another one there, and another one over the other side, and of course the other plastic fixing under the wheel arch as well. So we thought we'd get that back now that we've done the gearbox oil, and we've got those plastic wheel arch protectors in as well. We'll get those bolts done up, and that'll be the plastic under tray complete. So now we're just putting the fill plug back. There you can see it in the gearbox, and it certainly does help having a long spanner to get up, and they're in there. So that is now the oil back in the gearbox, and another part of the job completed, as we're slowly reassembling everything that we took off to do this job. Right, so we're now going to be ready to put all the battery tray back, so it's a last chance to have a look at this sort of full open area before a lot of it gets covered up by the battery tray. It's also a good chance just to have a little check round and make sure that you've got everything back where you want it to go back, and there's no sort of plugs missing, because we had all the starter motor off and the clutch back. We're happy with that, so we're now going to start putting the battery tray back. And the battery tray as you see from us taking it apart, is almost sort of an under bracket which supports the air intake pipe. The battery tray goes back on top, and then the air box sits here, but we'll show you that as it goes back on. Right, so here's the first part of the battery tray, although it's probably slightly more than that because it holds the or supports the air box and the air tube, and then the main battery tray goes on top of that. It's a series of bolts on top and down on the side there, so we'll get on and get that put back in. Then we'll have to put the main little sort of battery tray that sits on top of that in. So what we'll also do is put a little bit of copper slip on the bolts because they often can rust in, although actually this one wasn't too bad, and even the battery tray, although needed painting, wasn't as bad as some of the ones we find or come across. So not too bad, and it's painted up quite nice as well, and hopefully it'll protect it for a good long time. Right, so we're going to get those bolts done up. It's the two up at the top and the two just under there. Then the air pipe will be attached there, ready for the air filter to go on top and make that seal. The airbox also fits on there, and then the battery tray, as we say, will go on top. Right, so now it's time to put the battery tray in on top of the bracket. It's more or less a flat piece of metal that's just shaped, and really it's giving the battery support because that initial bracket is not really sort of big enough to support the battery fully. Of course, we've done up the little air pipe for the air filter, and those bolts underneath are done up as well. Right, so that's the battery tray in place, and again it's a series of little bolts that go into this main bracket, so we're going to get on and put those in. Right, so we're going to get on now and do the rest of those 4 bolts that hold that tray down. Hope you can see where they are ready to tighten. There's a little rubber cap that goes on there, and then it'll be ready for the air box to slot on and be done up and tightened as well. Right, so now it's time to put back the air filter box. So it drops down over the pipe just down there, fixes on these 2 fixings there, and of course you've got the hose that runs across there, and you'll notice that we took the tape off. You probably would have seen that in some of our other shots because we had that sealed off so nothing could go in there or fall in there, or even any sort of real damp air could get in there. We've removed that because we'll be putting back the air pipe, and it'll be linked into the air filter as it would be in normal operation. Right, so that's the air filter back on, and we're all ready to put the battery in with the new leads waiting to connect up. It's quite a struggle to get this tube back on if you want to leave the original clips on. This is one of the only cars that's got them on, but they are actually reusable, and you can hook them back over a pair of pliers, so it's worth knowing because we nearly considered that that was a one-use clip, which it kind of might be, but it is reusable as well. So we're completed on another part of the reassemble job. Right, so that's the battery in, and we're nearly at a completed job. The only thing we haven't got done is the brakes put back, but they're not kind of relevant to this job, although we've done lots of things that aren't strictly fully relevant to this job. We've done lots of brake videos in the past. It is just a case of putting them back on, and I think this video is quite long as it is, as we've tried to cover as many parts as we can. It's actually been quite difficult because it's been quite a big job, and as we say, we've covered lots of extra stuff that perhaps you would normally do, but hopefully it's been of use to you, and hopefully it's shown us sometimes take a little bit longer and doing some of those bits of maintenance you come across, or spending the time to clean bits and paint them in the long run makes it a tidier job, and hopefully some bits will last longer and look tidier. As I say, it's been quite a big job, and it's been filmed over probably over about a month or so, so hopefully if we repeat anything, although it might seem quick to you, for us when we're filming it, some of it's been, you know, a few weeks apart. It has been a bit of a big job, so if we have missed anything out, we probably have done it. It's just that we weren't able to film it or capture it, and as I say, there's a limit to what you can cover. The video's probably going to be well over 2 hours long at least, and you know, the bits I've looked back at, there are some bits where we haven't covered every little process, but hopefully we've covered more in more detail than what you'd normally see. And it's, as always, hopefully a good guide that if you're going to do the job, this gives you an idea of what's involved. And with the manuals, as I say, we use the Haynes manual and the X-Part disc, it gives you a bit of a visual reference alongside using those. What we've done, and you probably will be aware that if you watch this video, split into 2 parts, and this is the second part, which is mainly all the reassembling. So yeah, as we say, it's all back together. It goes into gear and the clutch operates as well. So we're gonna end this video here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like this video if you've liked it, subscribe to the channel for more, and also it's well worth looking back at some of the other videos we do if you've come across our channel just through watching this job. Look back through. Of course, you've got Instagram and Twitter as well, and all the links are on our YouTube homepage to both of those.